Hello everyone, it's Joseph Quested and I'm still here talking about JavaScript. Today we're going to be talking about functions. So functions, when you're declaring a function, it's very similar to when you're declaring a variable like I was talking about in the last video. So before I was saying something like let name equal Joseph, and then I could change the name variable like this, for example. So what we're seeing here is I'm declaring a variable, and then here I am doing something with the variable, in this case reassigning it to be a different name. And it's very similar with functions. So with functions, there's two parts to a function. There's the declaring the part of the function, which you'll know because you can see this function word is here, and then we write the name of the function, and then inside here is what the function is going to do. And then there's the calling the function part. So if you just declare a function, nothing happens. It's only when you actually call the function that anything will go down. Why would we want to declare a function? That's another very valid question. And the answer is because in programming, there's going to be a lot of things that you're going to need to do over and over again. So you might want to add a new user to your website or log them in or something like that. You don't want to have all over in all the different parts of your code that same way that works written heaps and heaps of different times, because then like if you have to change it ever so slightly, then you need to find all of the parts in your code where you mention that and then go around and all change them one by one. Blah, annoying, messy. So the thing that you really want to do, well, it was just a huge explosion outside my window. The thing that you really want to do is make a function, and that way you can just call the function over and over and over and over again in any places that you might need to. And then if you ever need to change the function, you just change it in one place, and it would change it in all of those other instances of the function. So let's talk a little bit more about functions. I'm just going to ignore this part for now, the actual challenge that we're trying to solve, this bit over here. And I'm just going to write out a function so that we can see how it works. The function that I'm going to write out is a function that adds two numbers together. So I'm going to call it sum, so it's like the sum of two numbers. And then this is where the idea of parameters comes into the equation. So if I want to write a function that can take in two numbers and then tell me what they are added together, then I'm going to need some way of getting a reference to the two numbers that I'm going to be adding together. So the way that works is you put in here, inside these round brackets, you put in some names of what the variables are going to be, what your arguments are going to be that you pass into this function when you call it. So people normally call these parameters. So these are the parameters of a function, and they are, in this case, two numbers. Now, there's nothing magical about num1, num2. Like I could call it this, and it would work in exactly the same way. But because this function's job is going to be taking two numbers and adding them together, it makes sense for me to call them number1 and number2. And then now I'm going to talk about this concept of returning. So a function doesn't do anything. Like this function right now just does nothing. So I could call it, I could go like this, and I could chuck in some numbers like that, and then I could, reload the browser, save it. Nothing's going to happen. It's just like literally nothing's going down in there. So there are a few different ways that we can kind of see what a function is doing. And one way that we can see what a function is doing is with console log. So console.log is another function. And then I could say hello inside here. And then now the place that this comes up, if you right click on your console, see there's this little inspect part. If you click on that and then go to the console tab, you can see here it says hello, and it even tells me where. So I'm in the functions JavaScript file. It says functions.js line 10. So you can see here on line 10, I put this console log in, and there it is getting console logged. And I could change this to whatever I wanted to, and then you can see that getting console logged out there. So console log is basically like a little window that you have into your code. And the reason that I'm getting to see it here is because I'm calling this function. So I defined the function here. Inside the function, I'm console logging out, and then I'm calling the function, and then you can see that it's getting printed out here on the page. But that is actually not what we want this function to do. What is that? We actually want this function to add two numbers together. So we could go like this in JavaScript, just like in normal math. You can add two things together by going like this. but it's actually still not doing anything because unless we return this information, then it just sits here inside the function and nothing actually changes. So the whole concept of returning is that now when I call this function and I pass in two numbers, any two numbers, and then it is going to return them added together, then I can use that information in a variable. So let's say I was to go like this, let results equal someone and two. Now down here, if I console log results, we can see here now that a 3 pops up. And then I could change this to 100. You can see it says 102. Change it to this. Now it says this. So we can see now that the function it's actually doing something. So let's just take another look at what's happening here. We're defining the function, which is another huge explosion outside my window. I don't know if that's really coming across on the audio recording, but there's pretty big explosions. So you can see here we've got these two parameters. We are returning those two parameters getting added together. And then here, once that's returned, we're saving it into this variable, which we're calling result. And again, this, I called it result. It could be called this. It would still do exactly the same thing. And in that same way, the fact that I'm just calling this result, because that's the name I thought would be best for it, the computer doesn't give a shit about what the name of this is. The names of variables are for us. The names of variables are for programmers. And here, the names of these parameters, that is exactly the same thing. So here, the computer doesn't see num1 and num2. The computer sees they're essentially just like a label. They're just like a name. These parameters here, and what I choose to call them, are just a label for whatever information I pass into the function. So I'm passing in a 1 and a 6, and you can see they're separated by that comma there. First argument is 1, second argument is 6. And you can see here in the declaration of the function, the first parameter is 1, the second parameter is, well, the first parameter is number 1, the second parameter is number 2, but the computer doesn't see that. The computer sees this, 1 and 6, and then it sees return 1 and 6 added together. So because I'm calling the function like this, the computer sees this, and then it's returning 1 and 6 added together. I'm console logging it out, which is 7. So these labels, the parameters that we're giving here, there's nothing magical about them. All these are is just a mirror image of the data that you put in when you call the function. So now, given everything that we've learned from this little monologue, here, this says complete the hello function by returning the string hello world. So now here, if we type in return, and if I could actually successfully type return hello world and we save, you see it's not passing. Why is it not passing? Oh, look at this. It's returning hello world with a capital W, but this actually wants hello world with a lowercase w. So this is a classic example of programming being incredibly particular. A lot of the time if something's broken or it's not working, look and check and see if all of your cases are exactly the way that they should be, because little mistakes like that are what catch you up the most. So let's look at what we learned. We learned about defining functions. We learned about their parameters and how those parameters are really just labels for whatever data we pass in when we call the function. And we learned about returning the data so then we can actually do something with the result of that function. Now, what you might be wondering is, like here you can see I'm calling the function. This is the part where I'm defining the function, and this is the part where I'm calling the function. So here, how does this work? Because here the function is getting defined, hello is getting defined, but I'm not calling it anywhere, like this. But you don't need to worry about that part, because within this little imaginary environment that Dev Academy has built for you here, in somewhere, it's like deep in here somewhere in this whole little system here, this part is the bit that's actually calling the functions for you. Look, you can see here's all of the parts where it's actually pulling in those functions from your other file and then calling them in this whole big mess of stuff here. But you don't need to worry about that. In this part, you don't need to worry about calling the functions at all, like I am here. All you need to do is you just need to write the functions, and then they get called automatically for you by the test. So now you can go on and complete the next challenges. Good luck!